So I have an event at Stetson, and I haven't figured out yet how to give everybody else access to the YouTube channel. So I'm pre-recording today's Dharma talk. Since I'm pre-recording it, I won't do any chanting or meditation, but there is something along those lines at the end of this talk, and hopefully you'll set aside some time this evening to meditate also. So I'm going to talk about Sangha, spiritual community, and I want to start by reading you a passage from Opening the Hand of Thought, which is a book by Kosho Uchiyama, who was a Soto Zen priest who died in 1998. And he wrote, "It is important that every one of us cooperate with each other to protect and maintain an atmosphere conducive to practicing together. There is no one who can claim to always embody Bodhi mind, the mind that aspires to practice and attain enlightenment. Each of us gathers and contributes his or her own little Bodhi mind to the general effort." Sawaki Roshi, a significant Zen priest who died in 1965, often said that a Sangha is like a charcoal fire in a hibachi. If you put in just one little coal, it will go out right away. But if you gather many small coals, each glowing just a little bit, then the fire will flare up. In the same way, every one of us should contribute a little Bodhi mind and thus enable our Sangha to thrive. I really like that metaphor of the coals in a hibachi. A lot of the time when you read about Buddhism, it sounds like it's all about sitting alone and meditating. And people will often contact me wanting to know what books they ought to read, or they want private instruction and things like that. A lot of Americans come to Buddhism as kind of a solitary practice. But Buddhism is really a complete system of practice, and some of that practice works better if you do it in a group. In fact, it relies on a group. So Buddhism isn't a set of principles that define a bunch of beliefs. It's more like a set of principles that outline a way of doing your spiritual relationship to the world. So when you decide to become a Buddhist, to formally become a Buddhist, you go for refuge. And what that means is that we direct the way we live toward what we call the three jewels. By going for refuge to the Buddha, we acknowledge that spiritual awakening is possible and that the Buddha's example reflects what we want to achieve spiritually. And then the second jewel is the Dharma. This refers to the teachings that the Buddha left, the guideposts he set out for us to follow his path of practice. And Dharma also refers to the greater wisdom that comes from realizing for ourselves what develops when we follow that path. And then the third jewel is the Sangha, the Buddhist community. So when we talk about Sangha in the traditional sense, the way it was talked about a long time ago, we would mean two main things. There's the Bhikkhu Sangha, which is the community of monks and nuns. And there's the Arya Sangha, which is the community of arahants, those who have realized the teachings for themselves and become enlightened. So since the days of early Buddhism, that idea has broadened quite a bit. But those two ideas of community are still important, so it's worth talking about them. So when the Buddha was enlightened, he spent several weeks really just enjoying the bliss of spiritual freedom and meditating. And first, he wanted to make sure that he fully understood what he had realized, that he hadn't missed anything, that he really was awakened, and that he hadn't overlooked anything important. And then he started wondering if he should try to share his wisdom or not. And at first, he thought he wouldn't. He knew what he had realized was deep and profound, not easy to understand, and he didn't think that people would get it. But then he said he started to feel compassion for other beings. He said, "I surveyed the world with an eye of an awakened one. I saw beings with little dust in their eyes and those with much, those with keen faculties and those with dull, those with good attributes and those with bad, those easy to teach and those hard." And he realized that people are like lotuses in a pond. Some might stay down in the water, really mired in the muck. Some will rise up, but only to the surface. Others will rise completely above the water and bloom unstained by the mud from which they arose. And so having realized this, he set out to teach. And once he was convinced that his path would help others, he deliberately and systematically created a means for its dissemination that could endure without him being there directly, because he knew he wasn't going to live there forever, and he wanted it to spread beyond just the people that he could talk to personally. And so the first Sangha, the Bhikkhu Sangha, Bhikkhu means monk, consists of those who have heard the teachings and decided to devote themselves to practice, to teaching, to maintaining monasteries and temples, so this path will continue to be available to others. Without that Sangha, without the Bhikkhu Sangha, the Buddhist path would literally not be available to us today. And so when we go for refuge to the Sangha, that act includes this realization that this group effort is what connects us to the Buddha and the Dharma. So some of the Buddhist students awakened very quickly. They had been pursuing the spiritual life for a long time and just needed a nudge in the right direction. Others practiced diligently for a period of time and were awakened later. And those awakened followers were the Arya Sangha, the community of arahants who were fully enlightened. So this Arya Sangha is very important because you have examples of people who have been where you want to go. And so you know from their example that the path the Buddha talks about actually leads to freedom if we practice diligently. So these are people who have been where you want to go, who have achieved the kind of spiritual awareness and freedom that you want to experience. And it's good to respect and support people like that, because to do that helps you recognize their value to your own path. But to truly show respect to a teacher, you should practice what they teach. So we have a tendency in our society to shy away from respecting authorities. Some people seem to think that if you have strong enough opinions, you don't really need expertise. That doesn't really serve us very well in a lot of cases. We're kind of living through some of that right now. We're right to be careful about following someone just because they're an authority figure. And I spent a couple of Dharma talks over Sundays, I think they were, talking about what it means to be true and what you can rely on. But we should also be wary of our own opinions. If we're too dismissive of experience and knowledge, we could well end up following leaders, spiritual or secular, who aren't really up to leading us. And if we just follow our own counsel, well, how good has that been so far, right? So we need to listen to people who have been where we want to go because they know the way. So this is what we mean when we talk about respect. Try to find someone who really reflects what we want to achieve and follow their instructions so that we realize the fruits of the practice for ourselves. And that's how we really show respect. So in the contemporary Buddhist world, there's a broader use of the word Sangha, and that one is also useful. And I'll read you what Vietnamese Master Thich Nhat Hanh said on the subject, because he expresses it very well. He says, a Sangha is a community of friends practicing the Dharma together in order to bring about and maintain awareness. The essence of a Sangha is awareness, understanding, acceptance, harmony, and love. When you do not see these in a community, it's not a true Sangha. But when you find these elements are present, you know that you have the happiness and fortune of being in a real Sangha. And I think that if you think about that metaphor of the coals glowing together and the heating one another so that they can produce fire, right? That I think that this idea of friends practicing the Dharma together in order to bring about and maintain awareness, I think you see that there. So this broader Sangha is a group of people who share values and are willing to support one another in their goals, their spiritual goals. And the Buddha called those people spiritual friends. And he knew that that was very important. It was so important, in fact, that he considered that a prerequisite to awakening. So Sangha is necessary to waking up. So that might seem a little discouraging if you're at home social distancing and wondering how you're going to find a Sangha now. It's possible. In fact, I'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's pretty easy to feel like you're part of a Sangha when you're going to one of our meetings at the UU Church on Wednesday, or when you're going to White Sands on Sunday, or something like that. You get a real sense of community when you're chanting together, praying together, having lunch together, and so on. But what about watching a video like you're doing right now? Can you find Sangha here? how would you practice Sangha? So Sangha, like everything else in Buddhism, is a place of practice. So how do you do that? How do you find that particular place of practice when you're deliberately staying distant from everyone? Well, I hope that being here is a part of that. I can tell you that it's important to me to do these things so that it can help you with your practice. And I think it's important, I know because I've talked to some of you, that it's important for you to show up and listen, whether you're listening when I'm live streaming or whether you get a chance to listen to them later. I don't know that it makes a huge amount of difference, although I think that for a lot of you, some of you have told me that to listen together is really meaningful. People do like Netflix watching parties. They'll watch a movie together on Netflix and stuff. It's kind of like going out to the movies. And I think that these things are all ways that we can connect with one another. I think it's connection in a different way than being in the same room, touching each other, hugging each other, breathing each other's air, which is just not something we should be doing right now. But I still think that it can engage us in meaningful ways. So as I've been finding Sangha myself with people from all over the world, and I'd say one of the good things about this particular time is that I've had to be a little bit more creative myself in finding Sangha, and as a result, I've engaged in spiritual community with a lot of people I'd otherwise have never met, or at least probably not been with this particular year, because we're geographically distant. And so, it's been very meaningful to me to sit in a Zoom conference with chaplains from all over the place, or other Buddhist teachers from all over the place, and Buddhist practitioners from everywhere. And to hear, we're all dealing with a lot of the same stuff. Whether we're sitting in the same room, in the same city, in the same state or not, is really irrelevant. We're all sitting with a lot of the same issues. So you can build a temple, you can create a corporate charter, all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean that you've created a Sangha. In order to do that, you have to find spiritual friendship. And I think to some extent you can do that online. Now, hopefully some of these spiritual friendships will evolve back into face-to-face friendships. But, for now, we can still listen to talks and pray together. Those are ways of learning and expressing your shared commitment. And then, as Thich Nhat Hanh said, actively practicing understanding, acceptance, harmony, and love. That's what makes anything a real community. So practicing together, supporting one another as we weather difficult times, things like that, that's what makes a community a refuge. And if we're part of a spiritual community, we don't have to go through whatever stress and difficulty life brings us all alone. We have one another to look to as examples of how to live better. And that's true friendship. So if we pursue our spiritual path as a solitary endeavor, we can get wrapped up in our ego, our tendency to self-rate. We can stay trapped in our own cycles of delusion. But when we have the opportunity to look beyond ourselves to help others, we find a different sense of direction. So in practicing together, adding our energy to our community, we energize ourselves in the process. So in a way, each of us is kind of like that single burning coal with the energy of Bodhi mind. We want to sustain that, make it grow, to really lead to liberation for all beings. We need to combine our Bodhi mind with that of others. So like I said, I've been sitting with other communities in the last couple of months, and I've discovered something that a teacher was doing that I thought was really cool. It was very meaningful to me to encounter this, and so I wanted to share it with you. So Kanho Yakushiji is a Rinzai Zen monk and the associate director of a temple in Imabari, which is a city on an island in kind of in the southern half of Japan. And he's also an accomplished musician and composer. And Japan is interesting. The temples tend to be family temples. So if your father or and mother, in a lot of cases, were Zen priests and run a temple, probably your destiny is that when you grow up, you're going to run a temple, and the family temple at that. But he's also an accomplished musician and composer, and that's obviously a personal passion of his. And so while being a part of the family business, so to speak, he also wanted to continue to explore music. And so he's been seeking ways to combine music and Buddhism in order to reach, make it relevant to younger people, right? And so I'm going to post a link here. This is a project that he did where he got monks from all over the world to chant the Heart Sutra together. And it's in Japanese, so you won't recognize it, but unless you've been chanting it in Japanese. But anyway, it's in Japanese, all set to music. And I saw this on Sunday evening with a Dharma talk with the New York Zen Center for Contemplative Care. And I have to tell you, watching it, I was moved. I was moved to tears, literally. And so just that feeling of Sangha being something that's so expansive, and recognizing that even though it was recorded at different times and everything, it was all these people working together for a shared purpose, saying these words that are so resonant for each of them personally and as a group, to create this thing that is pretty brilliant when you look at it. And I just was kind of overwhelmed by it. So I hope that you enjoy it, and what I'm going to link to is that particular video, but there's a number of videos on his YouTube channel that are worth watching. So I hope you enjoy that, and hopefully I will see you in the Zoom meeting tomorrow, or live streaming on Sunday, or something along those lines. So thank you very much for being here, and enjoy the Heart Sutra.